Why was she the only one without a voice in the room? The briefing table was a circle of men, shoulders squared, jaws set, their voices colliding in a low rumble. Maps scattered, red lines drawn, photographs pinned. She sat at the edge, her hands steady on the folder, her eyes calm. But no one looked at her. Not yet. The mission was already dangerous. That much she understood from the clipped tones, the shifting eyes. They spoke of coordinates, of night insertions, of assets and targets. But they hadn't asked her opinion. They didn't need it. She was just supposed to listen. Or so they thought. Her name was Captain Aria Vale, 29 years old, a pilot turned operative, and to most of them she was still the daughter, the one whose father had worn the same uniform years before her. To some, she was a symbol of loyalty, to others, a liability. No one in that room, not even the commander, knew the one detail that would change everything. She hadn't told them, not yet. The screen flickered. A grainy satellite image filled the wall, a compound crouched in a canyon, barbed wire glinting in the desert sun. Voices dropped to silence. The commander, a man with gray creeping into his temples, tapped the photo. Inside, we believe, is what they took. Intel says 3 captives, maybe 4. We move fast, we move quiet. Extraction window is 40 minutes. If we miss it, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew the cost of hesitation. Aria felt her pulse throb against the collar of her uniform. Her chest rose slow, controlled, like she had trained herself to breathe only in measured doses. She looked at the image, but her mind filled with another. A girl, younger than she had ever been in uniform, standing in the same dusty lands. A girl who had laughed too loud, who had trusted too easily. Her sister. No one here knew her name. No one knew why Aria had signed the volunteer roster before the ink was even dry. They thought it was duty, patriotism, orders. They were wrong. The commander's voice cracked the silence again. We insert with 2 Black Hawks. Team Alpha, perimeter suppression. Team Bravo, breach and search. Questions. Questions, always the same question. Always the silence after. She leaned forward. Sir. Her voice was calm, even, but it cut through the room like a wire pulled too tight. The men shifted, some hiding smirks, some narrowing their eyes. You're drawing the perimeter line too wide. Satellite scans show guard towers here, she pointed, her finger steady. You'll hit the sound sensors before you're within range. You'll lose surprise. For the first time, the commander looked at her, not through her. A beat, then another. And your solution, Captain Vale. Her throat tightened, not from nerves, but from the weight of finally being heard. We insert on foot, 2 kilometers east, through the dry riverbed. Wind will cover sound. Rocks break heat signatures. We get close without alerting the outer ring. The Black Hawks stay 5 clicks out, on standby only. Silence, no one moved. Then one of the men, a broad-chested sergeant with hands scarred from too many doors breached, shook his head. That's suicide. Open desert. No cover. You're gambling lives. She didn't blink. We're already gambling lives. I'm just choosing odds that don't leave us burning in the sky before we touch dirt. The words landed heavy. The commander let them hang like smoke in a sealed room. Finally, he nodded once. Noted. It wasn't approval, it wasn't trust, but it was something. The briefing ended. Boots scraped against the concrete floor as chairs pushed back. Voices rose again, louder this time, layered with tension. Aria stood last. She felt the weight of eyes on her back, some sharp, some curious, some dismissive. She didn't return a glance. Outside, the night air clung heavy to the base. Floodlights burned white, cutting shadows into hard angles. Helicopters loomed in the dark, their blades whispering promises of violence. She walked toward the hangar, her boots echoing in the empty corridor. For a moment, she let the silence press in. Silence, her constant companion, the thing she carried like a scar. Because silence was what had been left after her sister's voice disappeared. Silence was the echo that had driven her to pick up a rifle, to learn to fly, to stand in rooms where no one wanted to hear her. Silence was why she was here. But silence could be broken, and tonight she intended to break it. A voice called from the shadows, "Captain Vale." She turned. It was the sergeant, the same one who had dismissed her plan. His face was half in light, half in dark. His jaw worked like he was chewing on a thought. "You really think we can make that walk?" he asked. She studied him. The roughness in his voice wasn't doubt anymore. It was something closer to fear, honest human fear. "Yes," she said quietly, "I've walked worse." He nodded slowly. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're here for more than orders, aren't you?" Her chest tightened. For a heartbeat she thought of answering, of giving away the secret she had hidden under layers of uniform and discipline. But she didn't. Not yet. She only said, "Aren't we all?" His eyes held hers a moment longer. Then he looked away, his boots heavy against the floor as he left. Alone again, Aria sat on the cold metal bench inside the hangar. She pulled off her gloves, flexing her hands. They trembled just enough for her to notice. She pressed her palms together hard until the tremor stopped. The mission was hours away, but she could already feel the desert wind on her face. She could already hear the silence of the canyon, the silence of men who would not look at her, the silence of the one voice she still longed to hear. She closed her eyes. For a moment she let herself remember, her sister's laugh like glass-breaking sunlight, her hand pulling Aria across a flooded street when they were children, her whisper the night she left home, "Don't let them silence you, not ever." Aria opened her eyes again. The hangar was empty, the night was not. Far away, in a canyon lit only by stars, there was a compound. Inside it, maybe, a girl whose voice had been stolen, a girl who was supposed to be forgotten. But Aria Vale did not forget. She could not. And if the nation saw only a soldier tonight, or if the enemy saw only a daughter, it didn't matter. She knew what she was. She was the silence breaker, the one who would not let shadows win. The engines of the helicopters roared to life in the distance. The mission had begun. Why did the desert feel louder than the base? The night wrapped around them like a veil. Every sound carried. Every breath seemed amplified. Boots pressed into sand that shifted beneath their weight, leaving tracks the wind hurried to erase. The team moved in silence, 12 shadows cutting across open ground, weapons close, eyes sharp. Aria walked point. Her steps were measured, almost rhythmic, like she was following a song only she could hear. The canyon loomed ahead, jagged teeth of rock rising from the earth, swallowing starlight. Behind her, the sergeant's voice whispered over comms, "Still think this was smarter than air drop." She didn't turn. "Still alive, aren't we?" The reply was a low grunt, not agreement, not denial, just the sound of a man who knew the desert would answer soon enough. The dry riverbed stretched before them, pale stone, fractured earth, carved by water long gone. Wind threaded through the canyon, carrying sand, carrying whispers. Somewhere in the distance, a jackal howled. Aria lifted her fist. The team froze, knees bent, eyes scanned. There, just ahead, a flicker, not light, not sound. Movement. A shadow against shadows. A guard, half hidden by rock, cigarette ember glowing like a dying star. Her heart pulsed steady. She lowered her fist, one signal. The sniper moved forward, rifle raised. Slow inhale, quieter exhale. The ember winked out. The shadow collapsed. The desert swallowed the sound. They moved again. Every step carried her deeper into memory. The smell of dust, the sting of wind against eyes. She had walked this kind of path before, long ago, in another country, in another war that had taken her father's life. She had been 19 then. A daughter watching men carry a folded flag to her doorstep. That was the night silence had first cut her open. Now she carried that silence into every mission, and tonight it pressed against her chest harder than ever. Because tonight, silence wasn't just memory, it was possibility. Her sister's silence, if she was even still alive. Aria clenched her jaw and pushed forward. They reached the ridge. Below them the compound sprawled, a cage of steel and wire sunk into the canyon floor. Floodlights rotated, carving pale arcs across sand. Figures patrolled in twos, rifles slung, movements lazy but not careless. The commander's voice crackled faintly in her earpiece. Alpha, confirm visual. Aria whispered, confirmed. Perimeter patrols tower at 12 two-man shifts, west gate reinforced. Proceed, 40 minutes window. She lowered her scope, eyes scanning. There was something off. The rhythm of patrols, the placement of guards, it was too deliberate, like the compound wanted to be seen. Her gut tightened. Something's wrong, she murmured. The sergeant crouched beside her. Wrong how? They're expecting company. He exhaled sharply, or baiting it. Her eyes flicked across the wire, the walls, the shadows between lights. If this was a trap, it was well laid. And yet, something in her chest told her forward was the only direction left. Because what if she was right? What if her sister was behind those walls? She couldn't turn away. She tapped her comm, proceeding. They slid down the ridge, boots whispering against sand, bodies pressed low. The wind masked their descent. Aria led them to the east wall, where the floodlights cut weaker, shadows deeper. The breacher stepped forward, hands steady on the charges. He placed them soft against steel, fingers moving with practiced care. A click, a light blinked green. But then, a sound too sharp, too sudden. A radio crackle not theirs. Voices foreign, urgent. The guards were moving faster now. Aria's chest tightened. They had seconds. Blow it, she hissed. The breacher hit the switch. The wall split open with a muffled thump, smoke curling, steel bending. The team surged inside like water through a crack, rifles up, eyes scanning, heartbeats racing. Gunfire, short bursts, shadows fell. Clear left, clear right. But the compound wasn't reacting like it should. Too few guards, too quiet. And then through the smoke, Aria saw it. A door reinforced, half hidden behind crates. Its lock gleamed under harsh light. Her stomach dropped. The sergeant followed her eyes. That it. She didn't answer. She moved, fast. Her boots hammered stone. Her hands reached the lock, cold under her gloves. She pulled the charge from her vest, placed it against metal. The blast split the night. The door swung open. Inside, the air was thick, damp, the smell of sweat, iron, and despair. Shadows huddled against walls, chains clinking. Eyes wide, hollow, desperate. 3 captives, not 4. Not her. Aria's breath hitched. Her sister wasn't here. But before the thought fully broke her, a voice sliced through. A prisoner, gaunt and trembling, whispered, "It's a trap. They knew you'd come." Her blood turned cold. Shouts erupted outside. Boots thundered against stone. Floodlights blazed brighter, snapping on in unison. The compound roared alive. They were surrounded. Aria raised her rifle, eyes narrowing. The silence she had carried fractured into something sharper. Not despair, not yet. Resolve. Because if the enemy saw only a daughter, then tonight they were about to see what kind of daughter silence had raised. How fast can silence turn into chaos? The compound erupted like a wound torn open. Floodlights blazed, white beams cutting the canyon into fragments. Alarms shrieked, high and merciless, echoing against stone walls. Boots thundered, rifles cracked. Aria's team pivoted instantly, training snapping into muscle, silence collapsing into gunfire. Shadows flickered across walls as bullets sparked against metal. "Contact north wall," someone shouted. Suppressing fire, another barked. Aria pressed against a crate, the wood splintering above her head as rounds tore through it. She gritted her teeth, inhaled steady. The air stank of smoke, oil, and fear. Her eyes locked on the prisoners huddled in the dark. Fragile bodies, shackled hands, helpless. They weren't soldiers. They couldn't fight their way out. "Get them out," she snapped into comms. The sergeant glanced at her, eyes fierce. "We don't have air cover yet." "Then we hold until we do." He cursed under his breath but moved, dragging two men toward the breach. Another operative cut chains with bolt cutters, hands shaking under fire. Aria leaned out, squeezed her trigger. 3 controlled shots. A guard dropped. Another stumbled, clutching his side. But they kept coming, too many, too fast. Her gut screamed what her mind already knew. They had walked straight into the jaws of a trap. She ducked back, her breath catching. This wasn't random. It wasn't sloppy. The enemy had known they'd come, and that meant something darker. Someone had led them here. Someone had wanted her here. But why? A hand clamped her shoulder. She jerked, rifle swinging up, until she saw the sergeant's face, lit harsh by muzzle flash. "We need to move," he growled. "We're boxed in." Her voice cut low, firm. "Not yet." His eyes burned into hers, searching for the reason she couldn't say. Not yet. Not until she knew. Gunfire rattled again, closer now. Bullets chewed stone inches from her cheek. She pressed flat, heart pounding. The prisoners were moving, stumbling, weak but alive. Every second stretched thin, fragile, as though the night itself could shatter. And then, a sound split the air. Not gunfire, not alarms. A voice. A woman's voice. From the far side of the compound, beyond the chaos, carried by loudspeaker or sheer defiance, it didn't matter. It was sharp. It was raw. And it was familiar. Aria's chest seized, her ears strained. For a heartbeat, the battlefield blurred, sound folding in on itself, leaving only that voice. Her sister. She didn't hear the words. She didn't need to. The cadence was enough. The voice she had memorized years ago. The voice that had once whispered in her ear on storm-struck nights, promising she would never be alone. Her blood roared hot. Her fingers clenched her rifle like it was the only thing keeping her from breaking apart. She was here. Alive. But not free. Aria surged forward, instincts snapping chains around her body. Bullets streaked past, sparks dancing from metal. The sergeant shouted her name, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Every step carried her deeper into fire, deeper into the heart of the trap. Because silence had just given way to something stronger. A call. And she could not ignore it. The corridor was narrow, walls sweating damp. Light bulbs swung overhead, throwing shadows in jagged lines. Aria's boots slammed the ground, her breath sharp, rifle ready. Voices shouted behind her, her team trying to catch up, trying to cover. She didn't wait. She turned a corner too fast and almost collided with a guard. His eyes widened, his rifle lifted. Hers fired first. The body crumpled, the sound muffled under alarms. She stepped over him, her pulse deafening. The voice echoed again, louder now, close. "Aria." Her knees nearly buckled. She hadn't heard her own name said like that in years, not as an order, not as a title, but as a sister. She kicked open the door at the end of the hall. Inside chains, a single bulb in her. Older now, thinner, her face carved by suffering. But her eyes, God, her eyes, the same fire, the same impossible defiance. Her sister. Alive. For a second, Aria couldn't breathe. She just stared, her throat raw, her mind struggling to hold this moment that felt like it had been stolen from her too long ago. Then the world crashed back, the guards storming down the hall, the gunfire closing in, the weight of everything threatening to tear them apart again. Aria rushed forward, ripping at chains. Her sister's hands trembled as they clutched hers. "You came," she whispered. Aria swallowed the burn in her throat. "I told you I wouldn't let silence win." The chains clattered to the floor. But there was no time for reunion, no time for the 1,000 words locked inside both of them, only seconds. Aria pulled her sister up, half carrying her. Her legs were weak. Her body shuddered with exhaustion. But her spirit, Aria felt it in the way she held on, desperate and fierce. The corridor roared with footsteps. Shadows closed in. Aria raised her rifle, jaw set. "Stay behind me." Her sister's voice cracked. "No, I walk with you." The words hit harder than any bullet. Aria's chest ached, but she didn't argue. Together, they faced the storm. The firefight spilled into the night again. Her team was pinned near the breach. The prisoners crouched low, panic thick in the air. When Aria dragged her sister into the open, the sergeant's eyes widened. Shock, relief, something softer flickered in the grit of his face. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, "that's who you." "No time," Aria cut him off. "We move now." But movement wasn't simple. The canyon was alive with enemies. Spotlights searched, rifles cracked, sand erupted under bullets. And in the chaos, Aria understood the truth. This mission wasn't about extraction anymore. It wasn't about orders. It wasn't even about survival. It was about defiance. It was about refusing to let silence bury her sister, her voice, her memory. So she raised her rifle, shoulders squared, eyes burning. And with every shot, every step, every breath, she carved a path not just for her team, not just for the prisoners, but for the girl beside her who had been silenced too long. The enemy had seen only a daughter. But tonight, they were about to learn what that meant. How long can resolve hold before it breaks? The canyon floor had turned into a storm of lead and fire. Muzzle flashes split the night like lightning. Bullets screamed, ricocheting off stone, chewing through crates, shattering glass. The air burned with cordite, the sting sharp against the back of the throat. Aria moved through it like a blade, each step measured, each breath controlled. Her rifle barked in short, punishing bursts. She wasn't just firing, she was carving space, clawing open a path through walls of men and steel. Her sister clung close, her frame trembling but her eyes unflinching. She didn't cower. She didn't hide. Every time Aria pulled her forward, she followed, jaw tight, spirit unwilling to bend. The sergeant pressed against a concrete slab, his helmet askew, his voice sharp through the comms. "We're running out of ammo. Air support's still 5 minutes out." "Then we buy 5 minutes," Aria snapped, dropping another guard with 2 clean shots. Her words weren't bravado, they were necessity. Behind them, the prisoners huddled low, wide-eyed, fragile. Men who had once been whole now broken down to bone and willpower. They couldn't run fast. They couldn't fight. They were dead weight, except they were. Every one of them was proof that silence hadn't completely swallowed this place, and that was enough for Aria. A rocket screamed from the canyon wall. The explosion ripped through stone, showering the team in dust. The blast knocked Aria to her knees, her ears ringing, her vision fractured by sparks. Through the haze, she felt her sister's hands on her shoulders, felt the grip, desperate, anchoring. "Get up," her sister gasped, her voice, raw but alive, cut sharper than the blast. "Don't stop now." Aria blinked hard, grit stinging her eyes. She pushed to her feet, muscles screaming, lungs burning. Her sister was right. Stopping was death. Another voice crackled in her earpiece, urgent, strained. The commander back at base. "Alpha status." Aria ducked behind the wreckage of a tower, pressing the comm to her lips. "Engaged, heavy resistance, trap confirmed, extraction compromised." "Static, then, do you hold?" She looked at her sister, at the prisoners, at her team, faces carved by exhaustion and firelight, yet still fighting, still alive. "Yes," she said, her voice didn't waver, "we hold." The minutes stretched brutal. Her team formed a broken circle, weapons out, bodies pressed against cover that was crumbling too fast. Every shot felt like a prayer, every reload a gamble. The sergeant crouched beside her, sweat dripping through dust. "If we make it out of this, remind me to never doubt your gut again." Aria smirked despite the chaos. "If we make it out of this, I'll hold you to it." His eyes flicked to her sister, then back. That's her, isn't it? The reason you're here. Aria's throat tightened. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The look on his face said he already knew. A lull, seconds only. The gunfire thinned, replaced by shouts in a language that twisted sharp through the night. Orders being given. More were coming. Aria's sister leaned against the wall, chest heaving, her eyes finding Aria. "They'll keep chasing," she whispered. "You know that, right? Even if you get me out, they'll never stop." Aria swallowed hard. "Then I won't stop either." Her sister's lips trembled, not from fear, from something heavier. "You always carried too much." Aria wanted to answer, wanted to tell her there had never been another choice. But the desert didn't give her the time. Because the next wave came. Shadows surged through the breach, rifles raised, voices sharp. Muzzle flashes tore the dark. Her team braced. Aria pushed forward. Her rifle spat fire, each shot cutting down the storm. Her movements were no longer calculation alone. They were fury sharpened by years of silence. Fury that her sister had been taken, that she had been left to rot in chains while the world moved on. Fury that the enemy had thought a daughter would be weak. They were wrong. She felt the recoil slam her shoulder, felt the heat of the barrel, smelled the acrid tang of blood and smoke. Around her, her team fought like men who had already buried themselves in their minds and decided to rise anyway. And then above it all, the distant roar. Rotors. The sound punched through the night, through the firefight, through her chest. Air support. Her comm cracked. Black Hawks inbound, 30 seconds. Relief washed the circle, brief but powerful. But Aria knew 30 seconds was a lifetime in battle. She grabbed her sister's hand. "Stay with me." They moved, fast. The team pushed toward the breach, dragging the prisoners, their backs bent against bullets. The desert howled with chaos. A Black Hawk crested the ridge, its spotlight cutting a spear of white into the canyon. The minigun roared, shredding the perimeter with a storm of metal. Guards scattered, cut down, the trap unraveling under firepower too heavy to resist. Her team surged forward, pulling men into the light. Prisoners stumbled into arms that dragged them skyward. The sergeant shoved one after another toward the rope, his voice raw with urgency. Aria pushed her sister toward it. "Go." Her sister's eyes flared. "Not without you." Aria's jaw clenched. This isn't a choice. But before her sister could answer, a shot cracked. Aria spun. The sergeant staggered, his shoulder exploding red. He fell to his knees, teeth bared in pain. "Go," he shouted, shoving another captive toward safety. Aria's heart wrenched. She wanted to drag him too, but bullets rained, sand erupting around them, the canyon splitting with fury. Her sister's voice raw, desperate. "Aria." She grabbed her arm, shoving her onto the rope. "Climb." Her sister clung, eyes burning with refusal, but she climbed, inch by inch, not fast, not strong, but alive. Aria turned back, rifle blazing, covering every step. Her chest heaved, her body screaming, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Because silence wasn't winning tonight. The Black Hawks lifted, rotors shredding the air. Prisoners hauled inside, her sister pulled by strong hands, her face pressed against the window, eyes locked on Aria below. Aria backed into the shadow of the breach, her rifle dry, her body soaked in sweat and grit. The sergeant slumped against the wall, blood pooling, his breath ragged. "Don't you dare leave me," she hissed, dragging him by the vest. He groaned, half laugh, half pain. "You're impossible." "Damn right." She pulled step by brutal step, her muscles threatening to snap. Above, the Black Hawk circled, waiting, spitting fire into the canyon to buy them seconds more. Aria's arms trembled, her vision blurred, but she hauled him to the rope, shoved his hands against it, and screamed into his face, "Climb or I'll kill you myself." He gave her a look, pain, defiance, a flicker of respect, then started to climb. Aria fired her last rounds into the canyon, the rifle clicking empty. Enemies closed, shadows swarming. She grabbed the rope. Her arms burned, her lungs tore, but she climbed. Bullets snapped past, biting air. A hand reached down her sister's, thin but iron, their fingers locked. And for the first time in years, Aria felt something stronger than silence pulling her up. The helicopter roared higher, lifting them into the night, the compound shrinking, the canyon burning below. She collapsed inside, her sister's arms wrapping around her, trembling, fierce. The sergeant slumped beside them, pale but alive. The rest of the team, bloodied, bruised but breathing, sat in silence. The silence wasn't empty now. It was full, full of survival, full of voices that had refused to be erased. Aria leaned her head back, eyes closing, breath ragged. The mission wasn't over, the war wasn't over. But tonight, they had not let silence win. She didn't hear the warning at first, just the faint tick of her rifle's safety against her glove and the sound of her own breath fogging in the cold night. But then came the murmur, through the radio, a broken whisper. They're moving faster than expected, cut off in less than 5. Her eyes narrowed against the scope, scanning the ruins below. A convoy of trucks, shadows slipping out, armed, deliberate. Her job was simple, or that's what command had told her. Cover the unit, hold this vantage, keep the line alive. But even as she steadied her aim, something twisted deep in her chest. It wasn't the mission that made her pulse race. It was the memory. The last time she'd been this close, someone else had died instead of her. A sharp crack tore through the silence. Not her shot, theirs, echoing, bouncing off the broken stone walls. She ducked back, breath caught, heart slamming. Another voice broke through the comms. We're losing position. Where the hell is our cover? She should have fired already. Should have done the thing they trained her to do. But all she saw through the scope was a boy's face, 17, maybe 18, pressed into her memory from a past ambush. His eyes still lingered when she closed hers. And tonight, one of those men moving across the ruins below had the same shoulders, the same careless stride. Her finger trembled, then stilled. The rifle barked once and the first shadow fell. A pause, long enough for the other side to look up, confused. Then panic. The convoy split, scattering for cover. That single breath she took in the silence after, she knew it would carry weight, because silence was always heavier than sound. Through the crackling comms came her sergeant's voice, rough, almost relieved. She's on the glass. We've got a chance now. But her chance was not the same as theirs. For them, it was a line held. For her, it was a promise barely kept, one step away from slipping. The firing began in earnest. The squad below pushed forward. Smoke lifted, orange flares cutting the dark. Her rifle kicked again, then again, each shot precise, but inside she felt the fracture widening. Each man she cut down was another stone in the wall of her silence. And then she saw him. Not through her scope, not in the convoy, not even in this war, but in her head, the one who had left her with that silence. Her father bent over in the dim light of their farmhouse kitchen, calloused hands wrapped around a mug he never quite drank from. He never said much, not after her brother left and didn't come back. He looked at her once, just once, before he walked out into the night, and she never saw him again. That memory came unbidden, cruel in its timing. She blinked it away, pulled her cheek tighter against the stock, and whispered under her breath, not a prayer, not a curse, just a name she hadn't spoken in years. The next shot found its mark. The enemy line wavered, but she didn't lift her head. She kept her eye in the glass, breathing, holding, firing. Down below, the squad was shouting now, advancing past the burned-out husks of cars. She saw them move like ghosts, black against black. One of them turned his face up toward her position, just long enough for her to see the glint of his eye through the smoke. She didn't know his name, but she felt the weight of his trust. That trust was heavier than her rifle. The minutes blurred. Shouts, blasts, silence broken and rebuilt. Her cheek grew sore against the stock, her breath shallow, her shoulders locked. And all the while her mind whispered the same refrain, "Don't fail them the way you failed him." Finally, the last truck burned. The last shadow fell. The squad pushed through what was left of the enemy line, their boots striking broken glass, their voices still sharp with adrenaline. And she stayed prone, still staring through the scope, though there was nothing left to see. Her comm cracked again, softer this time. Not the sergeant, a younger voice, shaky. "Ma'am, you saved us tonight." She almost answered, almost let the silence crack open into words, but she couldn't, because saving them was never about them. It was about her, about patching a wound that never closed. She lifted her head finally, the scope leaving a cold mark against her skin. She lay back against the stone, eyes fixed on the starless sky. For a moment there was peace, a fragile thing, and then, just as the smoke began to clear, another sound drifted through the night. A sound she recognized. Not boots, not gunfire, not the crackle of burning fuel. It was the faint, rhythmic hum of rotor blades, far off, growing closer. She sat up, pulse quickening. The mission wasn't over, not yet. And for the first time that night, she allowed herself to whisper into the radio, "Incoming. You're not safe. None of us are safe." But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Why hadn't the rotors passed overhead yet? She kept listening, breath shallow, every nerve pulled tight. The sound grew thicker, pressing into the night sky until it felt like the stars themselves were vibrating. Not one helicopter, not two, more, heavy, layered, deliberate. Whoever was coming wasn't searching. They were arriving. Her squad below had gone quiet too, rifles raised toward the horizon where the noise swelled. Their voices on the radio dropped to hushed fragments. "Is that ours?" They didn't say anything about "wait." No answer came from command, only static. Her hand clenched the grip of her rifle until the leather creaked. She'd been here before. The silence before someone admitted the plan had changed, or worse, that there had never been a plan at all. She learned the hard way that the ones holding the maps weren't always holding the truth. And in that silence, she felt the ache again. Her father's voice in memory, low and unfinished, telling her once, "Never wait for someone else to give you permission to survive." The first helicopter dipped into view, its silhouette cutting across the glow of burning trucks. Black, heavy, armored. Not theirs, not rescue. Her throat tightened. The enemy wasn't retreating, they were escalating. She slid back from her vantage, boots crunching against grit. Her comm hissed with panic. "They'll box us in 2 minutes tops. We don't have the ammo for this." She wanted to answer, to steady them, but words stuck in her throat. She had none of the certainty her voice would demand. What she had was a decision. Stay high, keep shooting, and die when the hillside was overrun. Or leave her perch and stand with them in the open, where her scope meant little, but her silence would finally break. She moved. Her descent was fast, reckless, every step scraping stone. Once she stumbled, hands scraping raw against rubble, but she didn't stop. Dust filled her mouth, her nose, but she forced her legs to keep going. The closer she came, the clearer she saw their faces, her squad scattered across broken walls, waiting for a lead that hadn't yet been given. When they saw her drop into their line, rifle slung, pistol drawn, their eyes widened. One of the younger ones muttered, almost disbelieving, "She left her nest." The sergeant's face was hard, sweat streaking through soot. "Tell me you've got a plan." Her lips parted. She wanted to speak, to tell him what she knew, what she feared, what haunted her every time she pulled the trigger. But the rotors thundered closer, drowning her words before they left her. Instead, she pointed to the narrow alley where the firelight didn't reach. The only gap that might, if they moved fast enough, slip them out before the ring closed. For a breath, no one moved. Then the sergeant's jaw clenched and he barked, "Move." The squad broke, sprinting for the alley. Boots slammed against stone, breaths ragged, metal clattering against armor. She stayed near the back, pistol raised, every corner a threat. The first helicopter crested the ridge. A spotlight slashed across the ruins, blinding, merciless. Shouts rang out in a language she hadn't heard in years, sharp, commanding, almost familiar. Her chest tightened. It wasn't just the enemy. It was him. A voice she hadn't expected to hear again. Her legs faltered mid-step. For a second the squad pulled ahead, leaving her in the wash of light. And in that glare, memory folded into reality. Her father's shoulders, silhouetted against the farmhouse door. The same cadence in his voice, rough and unyielding. She snapped back only when a hand seized her arm. One of the privates, eyes wild. "Ma'am, don't stop, come on." They pulled her forward, dragging her into shadow before the light swept back. She stumbled into the alley, heart hammering, the roar of rotors vibrating through her ribs. The squad pressed themselves against the walls, gasping, some whispering prayers, some cursing under their breath. The sergeant leaned close, voice low but cutting. "We need silence now more than ever. Can you do that?" Silence, always silence. She nodded once, though every part of her wanted to scream, to demand, to ask the question tearing through her. Why did that voice sound like his? The squad pushed deeper into the alley, the sound of helicopters circling above like predators scenting blood. She followed, pistol steady, but her mind reeled. The past wasn't supposed to return here, not in this way, not in this war. And yet, as the shadows closed in around them, she knew this mission wasn't just survival anymore. It was revelation. Because the enemy might not only see her as a daughter. They might have already known whose daughter she was. Why did every shadow feel alive tonight? The canyon had grown silent, but not truly silent. Just the kind of quiet that presses against your chest, the kind that makes every heartbeat loud enough to hear through stone. Aria crouched behind a fractured wall, eyes scanning. She could feel the heat of yesterday's fires, smell the acrid residue of spent gunpowder still clinging to the air. Her sister pressed close, voice trembling but firm. "What now?" Aria didn't answer immediately. Her hands clenched the rifle tight. She had expected rescue, relief, maybe even a moment to breathe. But the helicopters hadn't been friendly. The rotors overhead had circled, far enough to tease them with escape, close enough to remind her they were still trapped. She exhaled slowly, letting her mind sift through fragments. Every sound was a thread, boots on stone, distant voices in a language she half recognized, the whisper of wind through the canyon. Every thread was a signal, a warning, a possibility. The squad was quiet, too quiet. They waited, crouched behind rubble, eyes darting. Even the sergeant, his face pale and streaked with sweat, wasn't speaking. He trusted her. He always had, but tonight she knew trust alone wasn't enough. Not when the enemy might know who she really was. And that was the new fear. This was no longer just a mission. This was personal. A shadow shifted at the canyon's edge. She froze, pulse sharp against her ribs. Not a soldier, not one of hers. He stepped forward. Tall, broad, a silhouette she had not seen in years. But the stance, the certainty, the cruel ease of presence, it was unmistakable. Her father. The man who had walked out of her life and left silence behind. The man she had remembered in nightmares, in the hollow ache of absence. And here he was, standing in the desert, aligned with the enemy, calm as stone, eyes scanning her, not quite recognizing, not quite admitting. Her sister gasped, pressing into her side. "Is that?" Aria didn't answer. Her mind screamed, but her mouth stayed closed. Because if he saw her hesitation, if he saw her as a daughter, the mission could collapse. She couldn't afford that, not for her team, not for her sister, not for herself. She raised her rifle, finger steady. But the weight wasn't in the weapon. It was in the years she'd carried silence, the years she'd walked in a world that never asked for her truth. And now truth was here, moving toward her, with every step measured and deliberate. "Aria," a voice came, not her father, but the enemy commander, stepping into the moonlight, too calm for this chaos. "Do you really think you can walk out of this?" Her teeth clenched. "I don't think I do." The canyon shivered with tension, air electric. Every man in her squad waited for the command, for the signal, for the inevitability of violence. But she didn't shoot. Not yet. Because she saw him hesitate too. For the first time in decades, the man who had left her as a girl standing in empty halls, who had vanished into silence, hesitated. He had a choice, and so did she. Bullets didn't fly. Orders didn't come. Only the quiet stretching thin between them, heavy with years of absence and loss. Her sister tugged at her sleeve. "Do you know what he wants?" Aria shook her head, but inside she did. Control, recognition, power over what had been lost, and maybe fear, fear of the daughter who would not be silenced. She stepped forward slightly, exposing herself. The canyon froze around her. Even the wind held its breath. "You left me," she whispered. Not loud, not pleading, just truth, raw and sharp. "You left me to find my own way." His shoulders stiffened. The enemy commander moved slightly, trying to reclaim the moment. But her father's gaze held hers. It flickered, almost recognition, almost regret, almost fear. Her sister stood beside her now, shoulders squared. "She is no one's daughter tonight," she said, voice clear. "She is her own." The words landed like a hammer. Aria felt the surge of resolve. She could not undo the past, could not erase the choices that had brought them to this canyon floor, but she could act, she could move, she could fight, she could protect. The enemy commander's lips tightened. The shadow of her father stepped back, uncertain. The ground beneath them felt unstable, not just physically but morally, emotionally. Aria lifted her rifle, training it on the nearest threat. Not the man she once called father, not the sister at her side, the enemy commander. "Leave now," she said. Her voice carried over the wind, over the dust, over the remnants of the firefight. "Leave before more lives are lost, before silence wins." The commander didn't move. His men shifted, confused. And then, after a heartbeat that could have lasted forever, they did. One by one, they melted into the canyon shadows, leaving only echoes behind. Her father stayed for a moment longer, silent. And then, without a word, he turned and walked away. Aria lowered her rifle slowly, heart still hammering. Relief mixed with rage, grief, exhaustion. The canyon was quiet again. Not peace, not safety, just quiet, the kind she could breathe in slowly, deliberately, letting it wash over her. The squad moved closer, eyes wide, breaths ragged. "Ma'am, what just?" She shook her head. "We finished what we started. Extraction now. Stay sharp." Her sister pressed close, voice soft. "Do you forgive him?" Aria didn't answer immediately. Forgiveness wasn't part of this night. Not yet. But understanding, the fact that silence could be broken, even after decades, that was enough. The Black Hawks appeared over the ridge, rotors slicing the night. Their shadows cast across the canyon, and for the first time she felt the weight of the night lift slightly. As they boarded, she glanced once more at the desert floor. The echoes of the firefight, of the choices, of her father's hesitation, all lingered. She let them linger, because memory, silence, and courage often traveled together. Inside the helicopter, she allowed herself to exhale fully for the first time. Her sister sat beside her, hands clenched together, still trembling but alive. The sergeant leaned back, pale but breathing. The squad around them was battered, exhausted but surviving. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, she let the weight fall away. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why did the silence feel heavier now than any gunfire? The desert stretched beneath them, endless and pale in the pre-dawn light. The Black Hawks lifted higher, rotors slicing the air, leaving only the memory of the canyon below. Aria leaned back, rifle resting across her knees, eyes tracing the horizon where night surrendered to day. Her sister sat beside her, shivering, exhausted but alive. Every breath they drew was a small victory. Every heartbeat, a stubborn refusal to let silence dictate the world. The sergeant slumped across the opposite seat, hand pressed to his wound, eyes closed. Around them the squad whispered low, muttering about the mission, the enemy, the luck that had carried them this far. But Aria barely heard them. Her mind was tracing the steps that had brought them here, the ambush, the traps, the fear, the roar of the Black Hawks overhead. Every detail lingered vivid, etched into her memory. But more than memory, she felt the weight of choice. She had chosen to move, to act, to protect, to stand. Every shot, every step, every decision had been hers alone, and for the first time in years she felt the depth of what that meant. Her sister's voice cut through her reverie. "You saved all of us." Aria shook her head slowly. "No, we saved ourselves." "But you led," her sister insisted. "You were the one who refused to let silence win." The words made her chest ache. She wanted to tell her sister that it wasn't heroism, that she hadn't felt brave. That courage had been a necessity, not a gift, but she said nothing. She let the silence answer, heavy, full, meaningful. Below, the desert was awakening. Dust stirred in pale tendrils. A lone hawk glided across the cliffs. The canyon that had threatened to swallow them whole seemed smaller from this height, less absolute. And yet the echoes remained, gunfire, shouts, footsteps, whispered names. She closed her eyes and felt the weight of every one of them, the lives lost, the sacrifices, the moments she hadn't been able to prevent. They were all stitched into the night, into the mission, into her. A voice crackled over the comm. "Command, distant calm, Alpha Unit status." She opened her eyes, shoulders stiff. Her fingers brushed the rifle, now silent and empty. "We're intact," she said, words careful, measured. "We've got survivors." There was a pause, then acknowledgement. "Copy that, proceed to extraction point, debrief upon landing." She nodded, though no one could see it. Debriefing wouldn't capture everything. The fear, the loss, the choices she'd had to make, the moments she'd been forced to confront not just enemies but her own past. Her sister leaned her head against Aria's shoulder. "Do you think he—" She didn't finish the thought. Her father, the man who had abandoned her, who had walked with the enemy and lingered in shadows, was part of the past now. Not forgiven, not forgotten, but understood in a way only distance could allow. Aria let the desert breeze wash over them, the hum of the Black Hawk filling the void. And then she spoke softly, almost to herself. "Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with rifles or bombs. They're fought with memory, with the courage to act when no one else will, with the refusal to let silence claim us." Her sister squeezed her hand. "And we did it." "Yes," Aria whispered, "we did it." The landing zone appeared below, dust rising, vehicles waiting, medics preparing. They touched down, rotors whipping the air, sand in their hair, adrenaline still thrumming. The team disembarked carefully, helping the prisoners first, then her sister. The sergeant was last, leaning on Aria briefly for support before they helped him to solid ground. He looked at her, eyes hard but respectful. "You carry more than any of us could. Don't let it break you." She gave a faint nod, words unnecessary. He would never fully understand the weight she bore. No one could. And yet that was the point. Carrying it was her choice, her burden, her resilience. The medics began moving through the group, checking wounds, handing blankets, murmuring words of reassurance. Aria watched, nodding, the exhaustion and relief etched into every face. She understood every one of them. They had survived, yes, but survival was only part of the story. She looked at her sister, finally able to see her without fear, without urgency. Alive, whole enough to carry forward. The thought lodged itself in her chest. Some victories are measured not in enemy killed or territory held, but in the fragile life you manage to pull back from silence. The helicopters departed again, the canyon below shrinking into dust and memory. The squad, the survivors, moved toward the base. She walked beside her sister, each step heavy with exhaustion, lightened by the certainty of survival. The sergeant caught up briefly, walking alongside her. "You did what you had to," he said quietly, And somehow you made it human. That counts for something." Aria didn't respond. Human. That word hovered in her mind. It felt right, and yet it felt too small for what she had carried. She had been daughter, soldier, operative, protector. She had been silent witness to her own past and the chaos around her, and in the end she had chosen action. They reached the base entrance. Guards saluted, medics gestured, reporters already hovering at the edges. She didn't glance at them. She didn't want their words. She wanted only the quiet that would follow, the silence she could finally control. Her sister squeezed her hand once more. "You're my hero," she whispered. Aria's lips pressed together, holding back tears she didn't know she could afford. "We are all survivors," she said instead, "and we are all still here." The morning sun rose over the base, painting the desert in pale gold. Dust swirled, catching the light, marking the path they had taken. The canyon behind them held the echoes of fear, courage, and choices that had defined the night. And Aria understood something that would stay with her forever. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And sometimes the hardest, quietest acts of all are the ones that carry the most weight. She inhaled steady, letting the sun warm her face, letting the wind carry away the night. The enemy had seen only a daughter. The world had seen a hero. And she had finally seen herself. A long, quiet pause. Then the desert exhaled and the story of the night was etched into memory.